Hello Acolytes, and welcome back to Inktober. This is the 5th video I've made for Inktober this year, so if you'd like to see the other ones, you can go ahead and click that in the iCard above. This first illustration is about a cult. Do you think you'd be susceptible to joining a cult? What if you never even had the chance to say no? In Inktober's day 15, a young boy discovers an albino girl in the woods bathing, and when she's brought back to his commune, the prophet decides that she has to be sacrificed for the sins of the cult members. Unfortunately for them, this girl might not be all she appears to be. Firstly, I'd like to say that my Inktober book is out now. It's called Corruption. It's on my shop, afterplagueart.myshopify.com. Link is on the screen. If you would like to pick that up, you can read what happens next and all of the stories that I talk about today. I did write all of these out as short stories. Yeah, you can go ahead and read that. For day 15, which was Dagger, I actually really enjoyed this illustration. It took me a little bit to sort of decide on the direction that I wanted to go, but once I understood what I was doing, this one went by like a breeze, honestly. It's one of my shortest Inktober durations that I was drawing for. Because once I had it, I was like, oh, this is smooth, easy going, you know? So I found a lot of like beautiful references of like ethereal dresses and veils and that sort of thing. And I put a lot of detail into the ruffles of the dress and that kind of thing because this image is quite simple. I hesitate to say simple, but there isn't a ton going on. It's mostly just a portrait. So I was able to put a lot of detail into the fabric of her dress especially. And I also tried to make it look a little bit transparent. I think that turned out pretty good. And I really like the ruffle on top. I think that it serves the purpose that it's meant to serve. The dagger, I also really like. I like this curvy sort of dagger. I do wish that maybe it was a little bit more prominent, that maybe I had made her dress, but maybe I had made the blade of the dagger black, just something to create some contrast and make it stand out a little bit more. But I do really like how it turned out. I also wish I gave it a bigger handle with the skull on the tip because I don't think it's super noticeable. Something that I did have to go back and change at a certain point was the girl in this story is supposed to be extremely pale. She's supposed to have albinism. So she's got white skin, white eyelashes, white eyebrows, that kind of thing. But initially I drew her with sort of these dark eyebrows, and so I had to go back in and change that and make them lighter. I considered doing the same for her eyelashes, but I've tried to draw characters with white lashes before and I've struggled, so it's something that I need to practice definitely, but I ended up keeping her eyelashes dark. I'm not entirely sure what these runes in the background mean. I think it's just a circle of all of the runes that are used in pagan sort of beliefs and rituals. I'm not specifically like trying to demonize pagan rituals or anything. I just think that they're quite fascinating. Something that was difficult but also fun to do as well was her crown. All of these like really intricate roses and symbols and that kind of thing. I did end up, because I made the background black, I did end up going in and making those spines that are coming off the crown white, and I really liked how that looked, so that went really well. I also decided to make that runic circle in the background white as well, just because I thought that would make it stand out more. It would make the contrast better between her and the background than if the circle itself had been like a white cutout or something like that. So I did make it that white color. I also added some blood splatter on her blade and her hand, just to imply that something bad is going on. I maybe wish that I had added a tiny bit more blood, but I'm pretty pleased with the amount that's there. It's nice and subtle, and I think the leaking blood from her eyes also adds to this sort of otherworldly feeling. So this is Inktober's Day 15 Dagger, and the illustration took me 2 hours and 45 minutes. If you'd like to get this image as a print, or any of the images I show today, you can head on over to my website, afterplagueart.myshopify.com. Prints are available right now, and so is the book, so I hope you pick those up. The next 2 prompt words are angel and demon, and I decided to do both of these together as a single illustration. So within this story, this angel, Uriel, is a messenger from God, and he goes down to Earth all the time, and he experiences the worst that the Earth has to offer, war, famine, disease, death. And he always tells people, like, this is a part of God's plan. This is his plan, and everything is going to end up okay, and your suffering is for a reason. That's sort of the justification he gives. But one day, after a particularly harrowing experience, a demon appears to him and is like, hey, what is the plan? And Uriel's like, I would never question God. And the demon's like, no, I'm not asking you to question God. I'm just asking, like, what's the plan? Don't you think that God would be down to, like, reinforce your faith by telling you the plan? And Uriel's like, yeah, I guess so. I guess he would be. So Uriel decides to go and confront God about what the plan actually is. What is all of this suffering for? And God's like, it's not for anything, Uriel. It's the result of free will. I gave humans the gift of free will, and now they're experiencing free will. There is no plan. There is no grand design. And Uriel is like furious. He's like, oh my God, you're kidding me. So all of this time, all of this suffering has been for nothing. And even though we have the power to stop it, we can't. And God's like, that's not free will. So Uriel's like, well, I don't care. And he goes down to Earth and he enacts like a dictatorship upon the people of Earth. And the demons are like, oh, well, this is maybe an opportunity for us. And I'm not going to spoil the story beyond that, but that's essentially the story behind this illustration. And I did want to portray that with the angel and the demon and the conflict for the balance of the universe. So I added this like scale in the background. And I think that portrayed it really well. I added the scale as well to be an element that crossed both pages. In the book, this is a centerfold spread. Most of them are, just a single page, but I wanted this to be like a big wham image right in the center. And because of the sort of odd composition here, I did have to add in some... It's not necessarily an odd composition, it's just I wanted a diagonal composition between the angel and the demon, with the angel being higher and the demon being lower and all that. But because of the individual page compositions, I had to add in these elements to fill in the space. And I like what is that called? The pentagram for the demon? But I'm a little less sure about the cloud for the angel. I just really couldn't think of anything else that is like symbolically representative of angels except like the sky and the heavens and that kind of thing. So I'm not 100% sure about it. I do think it balances the image well though, because the dark pentagram definitely adds a lot of weight to that one end, and so there needed to be a counterbalance weight on the other corner. I'm really pleased with how the demon turned out. I like his design. I really like these big horns, and obviously I gave him a goat head because that's, pretty classic demonic energy. I also think it turned out well with the inking style that I was using, and I took a lot of care to add a lot of detail to his fur. It took a really long time, but I think it's worth it. I think the fur ended up looking, really curly, really dense, really dark, that kind of thing. And I really liked that. As far as the rest of his body went, I wanted to make some of the areas of lighter detail darken into just a shadow or a silhouette without fully filling in the space. So I had to do a lot of using the lasso tool to select the form and then absolutely going at it with hatching, So I did a lot of that. The other thing that I'm not the most sure about was the sort of metal that I tried to do. I had an image pulled up in front of me of a brass scale. And so I was trying to follow that image in terms of, creating shadow and reflections on the metal of the scale. I'm not 100% sold with how it turned out, but it's to the point where it's not the worst thing ever, so I'm okay with it. But it definitely did present a bit of a challenge. Something that I did that I thought was kind of fun was for the beads that were tying the baskets to the ends of the scale, the arms of the scale. When it goes over an area that's black, I just made them white, which I thought was really fun. I really like the way that looks. And it makes it visible across the board without too much detail. I really like that. Demon is probably one of the most hatched characters I've done. He has just such an intense amount of it on him, and I like it a lot. I like the effect that it provides. I think that his hand being black like that is an interesting part of his design as well. I didn't do it with the other one, and that was purposeful. I don't know. I thought that it would make it stand out better against his front thigh there, and I think that did work. The placement of his back leg is kind of confusing. It's just sort of meant to be placed directly behind him. I think that it works, even if it does look kind of strange. I don't think it's strange enough to really comment on. I don't know, you guys will have to tell me. So I did this sort of dark cloud on the angel side to balance out the demon side, and I do think it balances the weight of the illustration. And then I went on to the angel. I did the demon first because I was like, the angel's gonna be hard, and I was completely correct. The angel was so hard, so tedious. He has so many eyes. He has more eyes than you're even seeing in this sketch here. At the end, I went in and I added even more eyes. And I was like, do I add eyes on the wings as well, on the feathers? No, you don't. You don't, because there's already so many. And I had to shade each one individually because I'm dumb and I didn't make a brush. And I should have just made a brush. And my boyfriend's like, why didn't you just make a brush? And I was like, I don't know why I didn't make a brush. I don't know why I didn't do that. So they're all individually shaded, and it took me absolutely forever. Luckily, I did not shade each feather individually. I thought about it because I'm like, oh, the feathers overlap, they should all be shaded individually. But I decided against it, and I actually think it looks better because then you have the contrast of the eyes being very, very high detail and the feathers being sort of like moderate level of detail. They're still shaded whenever something overlaps them, but not each feather is shaded on top of one another, you know? I did do that for a different image that's coming up later this month. But thankfully not for this one, because that one took me forever. It was just a drawing of a bird, and it took me like 5 hours. So I'm very glad that I didn't end up doing the shading on each feather, but I do the shading where each of the rings overlaps the feather, and I feel like that makes sense. I, once again, am going to sing the praises of Procreate Symmetry Tool. Procreate Symmetry Tool, I love you. I would kiss you right on the mouth if I could. It just really helped with the shading of the metal in the middle. It sincerely, truly did help. And I don't know why I haven't been using tools like that before. I just haven't. They always felt like kind of intimidating to use, but they're so easy. And I'm so grateful that I finally just took the leap and learned how to use the symmetry tool, because it probably saved me like hours this month. So that was really fantastic. I am slightly unsure about all the reflections on the metal. I think it actually turns out fine. I think it looks good. But at the time I was like, man, I do not know what I'm doing. I'm seeing these shapes, but I have no idea what I'm doing with them. So it was definitely a challenge. For the rings, I decided to black out all of the interior pieces of the rings. And I think that was a good idea because it adds to the contrast. It gives a little bit of separation between the wings and the rings. Wow, that's confusing. The feathers and the rings is how I'm going to say that. So that adds a little bit of contrast, a little bit of change in shape. And I think that really helps it not get too lost and too confusing, because you have this solid shape right in the middle that draws your eyes and also sort of creates like mini little scenes within the rings, like the eyeball in the center. I think technically this is not a biblically accurate angel. I call it a biblically accurate angel because it's what people think of, but I think this is actually a combination of like 2 or 3 different kinds of angels that are described. So it's not necessarily biblically accurate, but it is sort of in that vein that people like to talk about biblically accurate angels, and I really like that. I like the idea of biblically accurate angels, and so I'm actually happy that I got to draw one, even though it was definitely super challenging. So I finally finished shading in that ring of all of the eyes. It did take me a really long time. Something that I had a little bit of trouble with was keeping consistency in the amount that I shaded the outer ring. Like I did half of it and then I came back and I was like, this kind of looks inconsistent. But looking at it now, I think I was just being a little bit picky. So I shaded all of the areas where the rings overlap the feathers. And then this is what I decided to do for the additional eyes, is I just made them like black little dots with sort of wrinkles in the skin, and then added some shines on them so they look like dark eyes. And I think this worked out really well. I could see why angels always announce themselves with like a "be not afraid," because if I saw this, I would absolutely I would perish from a heart attack. But also, it just I can imagine how something like this would be very overwhelming to your senses, because while I was drawing it, and even looking at it now, I don't know if I've got like tryptophobia or something, it actually makes me dizzy to look at all of those rings with the eyes on them. Like, I actually have a hard time looking directly at it because it makes me dizzy. So let me know if you feel that same thing or if I'm actually just like kind of crazy. I will accept either answer. So the last thing I decided to do was add a little bit of darkness around the edge of the demon, because I thought he just needed a little bit more darkness on his end of things, because he's being shined on with the divine light of the angels. And so the last thing I decided to do was make this pentagram look a little bit more like tendrily, a little bit more like it was reaching and ensnaring into the walls like a spider's web. And that was Inktober's Day 16 and Day 17, Angel and Demon. And it took me 7 hours and 45 minutes. Once again, if you'd like a print of any of these things, my website is afterplagueart.myshopify.com. Also live right now is the book. The book is called Corruption. It is a collection of 31 illustrations and 31 short stories. It's like a 350-page book, so it's not some little tiny book. It's a pretty hefty, like novel-sized book, so it should give you a few hours of entertainment. If you do pick it up, I really hope you enjoy. And if you do pick it up, please at me or send me an image, DM me. I really, really want to see people pick up my book. So yeah, please go support that. I would be incredibly grateful. Thank you again so much for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe and follow me on all my other social media. I am Afterplague on pretty much everything. I am Afterplague on Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, Threads, and I am after_plague on Twitter. Thank you again so much for watching. Go check out my book, please, and I hope you survive this post-plague world.